even with 20 years, we cannot be 100% sure if I am just lucky or if I actually have skill. That's the brutal and honest truth. Yeah, not a happy picture, but the first step to making the world better is to recognize that. And I guess, delighted to be here and thank you for hosting this. So here's what the bad news. The good news comes later. But who here has followed this bet that Warren Buffett had with a fund of funds manager? It happened about 10 years ago. I don't actually remember the name of the guy he had the bet with. Do you remember the name? Pardon?
The guy from Protégé.
So the idea was this guy runs a fund of funds. He said hedge funds are great, fund of funds are even better. And yeah, I can outperform. Was it the S&P that he had to outperform? And they had a $1 million bet going for 10 years. Basically, whoever had outperformed the S&P versus this guy from Protégé Partners, if the S&P outperformed, the guy from Protégé Partners had to pay Warren Buffett, a charity nominated by Warren Buffett, $1 million, and if not, the other way around. And guess what? He was ahead for a little bit of the time, but the S&P trounced the fund of funds that he selected. And they were going to do the bet again, except Warren Buffett said that he's too old and that he might die before the decade's out, so not worth doing the bet again. But Warren Buffett won that bet. Over and above that, we know that the majority of professional investors do not outperform the indices. And if we look inside this room, the brutal and unfortunate truth is that a large number, perhaps every single one of us, including me, it'll be possible to prove that we did not add value in the financial services industry, in that the cost of our fees, the cost of our living actually took away from what the investors could have gotten by simply investing in an index. That's a really scary thought, or should be a scary thought. And just in case you're interested, denial is an extremely powerful psychological phenomenon. And the vast majority of us in the industry live in a world of denial. And by the way, the guy from Protégé Partners lives in a world of denial. So I just did 20 years. I've done 20 years of Aquamarine Fund. I'm so grateful that my returns this year just edged over 10% annualized for the last 10 years, after all fees. And that's approximately, I think it's about 2 percentage points better than the S&P. It's not what I set out to do. I set out to be 15%, 20%, big, great hedge fund manager. But I'm enormously grateful that I've outperformed. But I stood up in front of my investors in New York and I said these words, and they're true. I said, even with 20 years, we cannot be 100% sure if I am just lucky or if I actually have skill. That's the brutal and honest truth. And any of you who've not read Nassim Taleb's book, The Fooled by Randomness, goes into this great length and makes the point very, very clearly. So that's a really scary thought, if you ask me. And it's an even scarier thought, I think, when we look at what's going on. I have had a conversation recently with a friend in New York who basically said that artificial intelligence is now starting to replicate a lot of the kinds of things that people like me have trained ourselves to do. And there's an argument that says that in the same way that AlphaGo is now beating the world's best Go champion, that we may all just be incapable of outperforming all of the computers. So, what the hell are we doing here? We should all go home, no? So faced with that brutal reality, and faced with I don't want to live my life in denial. I feel like the guy at Protégé Partners is in denial. What is the answer to that? And so, I think I do have an answer, and gladly it's not covered in the book, so it's new material. And it starts with a talk that I heard at my 5th year reunion at Harvard Business School, where there was a guy, I know the last name was Collier, and I failed to remember his first name, and he basically addressed the students 5 years out, and he said, look, he said, I'm certain that all of you will make significant amounts of money. You're graduates of Harvard Business School, that's great. But what all of you will fail to do is that you will neglect these other aspects of your balance sheet. So he kind of said, stop thinking of your life just as a financial balance sheet and income statement, and start thinking about the non-tangible aspects of your balance sheet and income statement. If we just think of, so it opened up my mind to something that has been slowly maturing, is, and one can describe it different ways, but there is the social balance sheet. And let me give an example. I'm reasonably sure that I have a higher net worth than Chelsea Clinton. But who's more likely to become president of the United States or hold any high public office? It's clearly Chelsea Clinton. Chelsea Clinton, whatever one thinks of the Clinton family, politics, what have you, has an enormous amount of social capital. She has an enormous amount of recognition for who she is, the places that she's been, the relationships that she has. And the social capital that I have, for whatever I've done, is a lot more limited, but there's social capital. You could argue there's another, maybe another bucket would be family. So I know a number of extraordinarily wealthy people who have just totally messed up families, messed up families, and it's not really necessary for them, I believe. I mean, things have gotten so far that maybe they can't unwind them. But what has happened is that they have totally neglected to invest in their family ties. And you know, then you could talk about your sort of personal health, your personal psychological state, all of those good things. And so if we think of the CFA, we are at the CFA Society. The CFA Society, and if you do an MBA, if you study accounting, if you study financial analyst, we all become really, really good at studying the financial aspect of things. And we all become really, really bad at doing the other things. What Christian Claytonson, another professor at Harvard Business School, said is that what you find, it's probably true of the CFA, it's certainly true of MBAs, is that as you go to your reunions, and I'm about to go to my 25th Harvard Business School reunion, the people who don't show up are the people who neglected to invest in the other side of their balance sheet, in the non-tangible sides, and they ended up getting divorced, they ended up having broken families, they ended up not being part of a community, and then it's not so easy to come back to your reunions and to meet people from your past and tell them what happened, even though they're quite likely to be very wealthy. So then let me just give you another slightly depressing thought, and then I'll get hopefully onto some good news, is that we all work in, I think that we all underestimate the degree to which we are hated by society. I mean, really hated. I know that not one of us here thinks that we caused the financial crisis. I know that every single one of us here makes a distinction between rapacious investment bankers and quiet buy-side people. That's not what the world thinks. As far as the world thinks, we are all one, and we are responsible. And we're the people who know how to take exams, we're the people who tended to get good grades, we're the people who tended to get selected for the better streams at schools, at universities, and then we come back and we sit in these jobs where we can provably, it's proven that the vast majority of do not add value to society, although we all somehow, where are the customers' yachts, end up living pretty good lives ourselves. And I think it's a real question, and this idea that all of us should not have gone into finance, we should have gone into engineering, or something where we can do something that changes society in a positive way, is an important question. So, not a happy picture, but the first step to making the world better is to recognize that. And I guess when I talk about the change that I'm sort of looking for, is that in 20 years' time, because of the way we in this room choose to live our lives, we end up not being as hated. And so something that I've said at the very back left, they're very shy, but we have Catherine Sefton and David Yud, who both work for me. Welcome to go talk to them and find out if what I'm saying here reflects what actually goes on in the office. But I literally, I've said to Catherine more than once, I don't know if I'll end up having added value to my investors, but I'm determined in my own small way to add value to people in my life. And I do that in a very small way, and I've not been very effective at doing it. But one of the great things is that even if you try, that's already your streets ahead of everybody else.